what you were saying about how Europeans maybe are a little bit happier with their government. One of the biggest misconceptions in my classes that I see in an introduction to or survey of American government is that most students don't realize that some of the biggest threats that we have to the United States is from domestic terrorism. It's not necessarily from outside these borders. So when we talk about having constitutional rights and we talk about being able to exercise this stuff and being secure in our home and having the Bill of Rights and all those rights that are listed, we have to realize that some of those biggest threats against us are from our own citizens, are actually U.S. citizens. And so I guess I just want to get that across, that it's not, we can identify some of the people that hate us and maybe want to bomb the United States, but there are a lot more people who don't look and act like we have labeled and categorized terrorists to be just as dangerous. And we have to be careful about making generalizations about an entire ethnicity or an entire race or an entire religion when that threat is a result of being angry with your government because it's not doing what it should be doing for its people. I mean, do you think maybe European countries allow for that kind of invasion of privacy, what we would call that, because they feel safer as a result of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is no, in most European countries, there is no debate between democracy or liberties and security. Security always wins, so without any debate. So it's always a preconceived winner. And Great Britain doesn't have a written constitution, so there are no written rights. And United States Constitution is unique because it is perhaps the only constitution in a developed country that strongly constrains the role of the government, and that's its primary role. European constitutions, those that are written, mostly expand the role of the government and give governments more rights than they give individuals.
We also have to remember that this Constitution was only written a couple hundred years ago. We're still babies. We're still pups.
We're still experimenting.
We're still figuring this out. I mean, there's by no means a solution, and the actions that we take and don't take, will set the stage for the future. But
You made me think of another point, and that is that our Constitution has been very adaptable over most of our history, and yet society is changing at a pace we've never realized before. You mentioned how the internet has never had a presumption of privacy.
Correct.
And yet the internet is quite new. And I've also heard the suggestion by many that the more of our lives that we live online, which seems to be more and more, the less privacy we will have. And as far as what that bodes for the future, I'm interested in your thoughts on privacy in the Constitution. It's not a word that's in the Constitution, yet it's been assumed that we have privacy rights. And at the same time, I'm interested in how you see the internet and our online lives having that privacy eroded because of modern technology.
So what are our thoughts on privacy?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on privacy as a concept within the Constitution, and how do you see modern technology changing / eroding those rights of privacy?
I don't think we have any privacy anymore. Guys, that's kind of reality. We're subject to the government rule, we're subject to regulation, et cetera. I mean, privacy is very narrow. It's very vulnerable, very fragile. Government can just intrude in any other names. Now, Supreme Court has trouble in dealing with privacy on the internet. That's the freedom of speech. Usually, okay, of course, internet pornography, what is obscene, what is pornographic. Used to be like theater, movies. Books, novels, photos. Nowadays, it's just digital. It's on the internet. So the thing is, if you have a case before the Supreme Court, the case has to be real. Somebody is injured. You must have a real person right in front of you. Now you got a digital, computerized image. Who is injured? There is no real person. So how can you make a case to say, this is obscene? So I think, technology poses new challenges to the government, including Supreme Court.
Referring to computer animation
Yes,
of
that's
nudity
what- yeah,
and pornography.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. No.
Me?
Mhm.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, the privacy as a concept.
That's not the response I anticipated.
Yeah, how do you define privacy? Everybody has a sphere of privacy. The government say, I cannot post your social security number. That's privacy. I cannot let your parents know what grade you got. That's privacy. But what you can do at home, in terms of reading a book, watching a film.
Yeah, the problem is exactly what Professor Sinclair was saying, is that privacy is not defined in the Constitution. Yeah, all of you would think, oh, I have this automatic right to privacy. You're violating my right to privacy, right to privacy. That was found in the Constitution in 1965. So where it was for that,
Or the Ninth Amendment.
yeah. Where it was in the, 150, 160, 170 years before, it was there, because the amendments that they pull it from were ratified in 1791, but they didn't interpret it from the Constitution until Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965. So your right to privacy was interpreted into the Constitution, or from the Constitution, by 9 unelected, unaccountable justices on the Supreme Court. So, is it a right that you're going to have forever? Well, you change 3, 4, or 5 of those justices, and you've already seen the right to privacy being eroded continually in a number of different areas, as it applies to abortion, as it applies to homosexual rights. That right to privacy is manufactured. It's not a right that's listed. And so all it would take is the Supreme Court saying, I think they made an error in 1965, and there's no right to privacy in the Constitution. You don't have it. And it's gone.
Even abortion is not a complete privacy or license to privacy. Abortion, based on Roe versus Wade, women can have abortion only at the first trimester. So if the pregnancy goes to the second trimester or third trimester, you don't have privacy. No right. Government can regulate.
I think that has more to do with the age of viability, and they kind of did away with the trimester system because the age of viability, the point at which the child can survive outside the womb, is coming earlier and earlier with technological advances. And so when the child can survive outside the womb, even with the aid of medical facilities, it's considered a person, and it's given that no person shall be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It's given those rights at the point at which it can even breathe with the aid of technology. So your rights to terminate that life are outweighed by the state's right to preserve and protect that life. So that's really where that distinction comes from.
For it to be a person, it has to be born. When does that begin? It begins at the conception or at birth. And Constitution protects the freedom of the person. But you're not a person yet. If you're not born, you're not a person. You are alive. Constitution protects the persons, not lives.
So it's the question of if a woman is 8, 9, 7, 6 months pregnant, whether or not you're saying the child isn't a person until she delivers?
I think so. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
I never knew, yeah.
No. Just-
one of the most important sources of a right to privacy in the Constitution is so-called due process clause, and appears twice. It appears first time in the Fifth Amendment, and appears second time in the 14th Amendment, one of the three post-Civil War amendments. And this big debate about where to put weight, right? Because it says, as Professor Forrest said, no person shall be denied life, liberty, and property. That's right, life, liberty, and property, without the due process of law. A debate has been where to put weight, whether to put weight on liberty, right, or whether to put weight on life. So Supreme Court used this notion of liberty in trying to understand at what point, for example, in the context of abortion, at what point the state or the government should not be interested or should become interested in the life of a child, right? And initially, they had this trimester system. They said in the first trimester, the government has no business in being interested in the life of the embryo, right, in the mother's womb. And therefore, this part is protected by the right to privacy because there is nothing that the state should be interested in. This is not a viable life. There is nothing that this viable life can contribute. There is nothing that this viable embryo can contribute to the life of the society, right? And therefore, the government should not be interested in the destiny of the embryo in the first trimester, and therefore, there is the right to privacy. Right? Opponents of this decision of Roe versus Wade, and proponents of the right to life are putting the weight on life, right? Because no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, and property, right? And therefore, the major debate in the context of abortion becomes when does the life begin, right? Of course, there is a philosophical life. If I ask you what is life, you may say, well, life sucks. Well, but it still doesn't answer the question what life is, whether it's a physical existence, whether it's a mental existence, whether it's a social existence, whether if somebody thinks that you're alive, right, and that you're a person, therefore you're alive. So there is a huge debate in philosophical circles and wider society what life is. But as far as the right to privacy, this right to privacy is not only in the hands of the Supreme Court, right? In your American government classes, you will see that the government itself, right, different bureaucratic agencies of the government can create decisions, right, circumventing Congress, circumventing the Supreme Court, at least initially, until somebody challenges them, basically create decisions that are undermining the right to privacy. And these regulations, many of these regulations, are being passed on a daily basis. So when you think about the right to privacy in the constitutional sense, you are thinking the privacy from government intrusion, right? You're not thinking about privacy from the consequences that your employer can impose on you if you post something on the Facebook, right? If you gossip your boss on the Facebook, therefore I have the right to privacy. No, I think I would very narrowly interpret the right to privacy as your protection from government meddling into your private life. And at what point is this advisable, and at what point it is not advisable, right? So the Supreme Court decisions have decided that yes, at some point it may be advisable. After the first trimester, yes, right? It becomes advisable for the government to be interested in the destiny of the embryo, right?
Yes.
But in many cases, the Supreme Court didn't think that it was advisable for the government to get involved into the private lives of citizens.
That's very true. We're talking about our rights protected from or against the government, not your employers, not your friends, not your family, parents. Government is perceived as an enemy, infringing upon your freedoms, not others. So if you're employers monitor your email. Can they do that? They can do that. Can they fire you because you smoke cigarettes? They can do that. Government is restricted. So, we're talking about government,
Yeah.
not because,
Very
this is the
true.
private, our system is capitalism. Free market, private.
Why don't we open it up to the audience now and see what questions you might have lingering in your minds after you've heard some of the discussion. Is there anybody out there in the audience that has a question they'd like to ask of the panel?
I was always wondering how Puerto Rico has like United States currency. They are protected by us, and yet they don't have any taxes, and they're not considered a state. I don't know why or how, or if it's something that may happen in the future.
Where's Hilda?
They don't want to be a state.
They don't want to be a state.
First of all, you need to know that Puerto Rico is
Yes.
part of the United States. It just doesn't have state status. It's
Right,
a
it's a
territory like
territory.
Guam or Samoa
Yep.
or Virgin
Yeah,
Islands.
well,
Well, they do pay
11.
taxes. They just don't pay income tax.
Right.
And that's only as long as they stay on Puerto Rico. To the extent that the Puerto Ricans come here, they can certainly vote for president. Because Michigan has electors, the Electoral College, then they would pay income tax here.
Right.
But it's only while in Puerto Rico.
So.
Yeah.
Well,
And they're all U.S. citizens. It's not like this is a foreign country. Some
in
some
this
people are under
line,
that mistaken
maybe
interpretation.
you may ask the question: how come Washington D.C. is not a state? Should Washington D.C. become a state? They pay taxes, but they don't have representation. Taxation without representation. That's
But
how
they have
we made
representation
revolution.
For choosing the
America was
president.
born out of the revolution, and revolution was made because of tax. So you may
Exactly.
argue,
Yeah. They have representation for choosing the president. They have 3 electoral votes.
Washington D.C., but they don't have
District
represent.
of-
I think
They
Matt,
have
they didn't have
one-
representation in
They have a
Congress.
delegate
have-
in the
they
Congress,
have
but
one
still
They can't
cannot
vote.
yeah,
yes.
in the
Right.
Congress, in the House, but they don't have senator. They just
Yeah.
have one.
I
person.
believe Puerto Rico also has delegates, do they not?
Yes.
They cannot
Yes,
They
they
have
vote.
do.
Yeah.
non-voting
Non-voting.
Non-voting delegate, yeah.
observer, non-member.
This is, I think, what Puerto Rico is an excellent example of free ridership. You would like to have all the benefits without contributing much of the cost, right? And I think it's an ideal place to be, right? I think ideally every country in the world or every state would like to be that way, but it's just not possible because with a lot of free ridership you cannot organize collective action. And without collective action there wouldn't be United States of America.
Right.
I don't think I prefer that, but right. It is divided, the population of Puerto
I
Rico.
would
Some
be
actually
happy
want to
if
be
I didn't
independent.
have to pay income
Some would
tax.
actually like to be a state, and others would like to leave it the way it is. Good question. Any other questions of the audience? You have one? Sure.
Okay, my question was actually, as far as the government fear, like people's fear of government intrusion, could it also be linked to George Orwell's book 1984? Do you think?
That's
Could
dependent
what
if
be
they read
related to 1984? Do you think we're approximating that, or are you suggesting that's our future?
I'm just suggesting, well, I'm actually questioning, could that be the
Microphone.
main reason why people also fear the government, that idea?
Well, yeah, I think if you read that book, that there would be some concern about government reaching too far. How would you
I
respond to
think
that, Gordon?
Why me? No, I'm joking. No, I think that you can. I think 1984 is a great metaphor. I think it's difficult to imagine a developed, fairly democratic country like the United States getting into the depth of government control that is described by Orwell. But at the same time, there are some aspects, not only in the United States, but in every developed democracy. For example, one of the most fascinating parts from 1984 is the invention of new speech, right? And Orwell is saying that the government has invented a new language, right? in which it is basically manipulating the citizens to think in a certain way, right? Remember our new language during the Bush administration, in which the main phrase was war on terror, or war on terrorism, and everything was basically revolving around that particular phrase. We had to pass the laws that are basically beating the war on terror. We had to behave in a certain way that's fighting the war on terror. We went through new security measures at airports and trains and everywhere where we had to fight war on terror. So I think it's basically a great matter. And Big Brother is watching us, right? There is not only the government, but your employer, right? And perhaps any other institution or club you may belong to, your community, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think there are many aspects that we can take from Orwell's book and said, yes, they're present in all advanced democratic societies, not only in the United States. But whether this causes fear of government, I don't know, because I think many people who have fear or perhaps anger towards government or perhaps disagreement with the government never read the book. So,
Well,
the sources are somewhere else.
It also depends on the people. I mean, how much you want government to do, how much power you want to give to government. I mean, the founding fathers created this republic, giving the government just enough power, not too much, not too little, enough to do certain things, not everything. So it's up to the people.
My big question is, we keep talking about this big bad government, and this government's going to infringe on our rights, and that the government's going to absorb more power, and the federal government's going to get bigger. That they're watching over us. Why is that a bad thing?
Watching us,
I mean,
bad thing.
What? No, in all seriousness.
No, I think somebody wants to respond to that.
Okay. Well, yeah, Clayton, definitely. But,
Simple cost.
okay, understanding the cost, but
The size of the government is too expensive for us to maintain.
Yeah, it would cost a fortune to maintain a watch on everybody.
But I'm not saying that we have to do it. Like, it's something that we should start doing. It's something that's already done. And so, I mean, I have another student in class, for example, in a class who is from a different country. And he said he found it phenomenal that he could, by identification of his ID or travel or anything, the local police station can pull up information on when he got into the country, where he was living, what his last taxes were, where, what hospital he had been in, boom, 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 boom. And he had been a cop in another country, and he said it would have taken us weeks to get all this information. And all this information is readily available. So the big question is, if our biggest threat is from domestic terrorism, and it is, make no mistake about it, why is it bad that they're watching more people?
Also, it goes against our notion of democracy. I mean, democracy means people make rules on the matters affecting their own lives. So we don't need a government to tell us what to do. We make decisions.
And
We're capable.
And that would be 60% of the U.S. population eligible voters who voted in the last election, 18 to 24-year-olds being the lowest cohort that turned out to vote. So you're talking about 54% in the 2004 election, nearly 60% in the 2008 election. So it's those people who are having a say. And I don't know about you, but I have a lot of students that, there's people who may not be as informed about American government. So are those the people that you really want making all these decisions for you? I mean,
I think the debate I think the debate about the size and the role of government is probably as old as this country, right? But I think your generation right now in this particular election cycle, your generation is witnessing very intensification of this debate, right? I think one of the major questions in 2012 presidential and congressional elections is going to be how much government do we want?
Yeah.
Right? What is the
Absolutely.
proper role of government? And I think it's fascinating to watch. I think there are clearly defined battle lines between Republicans and Democrats, and this would probably be one of the most contentious and interesting elections
I'm so excited.
that we have seen in generations, because this is, I mean, the world is changing completely, especially in the sense what Fareed Zakaria says, the rise of the rest. The United
Yes.
States is not anymore the only dominant country in the world. You guys are not competing only with other Americans for good jobs. You are competing with the rest of the world, because anything, almost anything, could be outsourced. So in order to have the good middle class lifestyle that your parents and grandparents had 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you cannot be just good. You have to be the best, right?
Right.
And many people are finding themselves in this position and saying, well, it's the role or the duty of the government to do that, to make our lives better, and others are disagreeing with that. And these are the battle lines that will not only define the elections, I think, but this will define the thinking about America, your thinking and your generation. You will be basically in the very center of this particular redefinition of how much government we want and what kind of United States we want. Do we want what Obama is saying, the old social compact of the United States, in which the government provides care about the sick, elderly, and poor, or do we want something else? Do we want more emphasis on a strong merit society where the best would win, or do we need somewhere in between? And where is that in between, I think, it's an issue that will crucially define your generation and how you're going to live.
Or maybe
Let me
we don't
guess,
want
you
any
have
government.
a response to the challenge of what's so bad about big bad government. He's one of my students.
And we like him all.
We do like him, yeah, that's okay.
So, yes, responding to Professor Forrest's question, why do we think government is so big and bad? I think it's just our fear of judgment. I think we all fear that someone is going to be
You're
judging
gonna
us.
get judged one day. We're all gonna be judged one
And
day, right?
just having it so close and personal by someone we don't even know. Also, I think our right to like freedom and liberty, I think we're entitled to that. Yeah, I think we all just think we deserve that. We should have this and that and be able to do whatever we want, even if we're not intellectually able to be participate in government, people within a government to make a difference. And then privacy, we just all feel that we can shut our door when we want, and we like to build our four walls, so no one should be able to look through.
Right.
Well, you should be able to do what you want as long as you don't harm others, right?
And
Don't-
and
don't-
that's the, you know, that's the question.
Yeah.
Every right entails a duty to respect. I mean, you want others to respect. So go ahead.
You have a question?
Is there,
the-
yeah,
the
is there a
microphone.
question?
There's, I know
Okay.
she had, but
Here you go.
What are some other cases some landmark cases that deal with privacy?
Lawrence v. Texas, 2003 is probably the seminal one. If you're going to read any case on right to privacy that is actually understandable, read.
That'd be good.
Yeah, more and more you'll find that Supreme Court opinions are written by their clerks, and so they read a lot like journal articles from law journals. Lawrence v. Texas in 2003 is really good. The majority decision in that has to do with actually homosexual rights. And the dissenting opinion in Scalia, written by Scalia, whether you agree or don't agree with Scalia, the man is brilliant. And in the dissenting opinion, you'll find that he begins from the start of Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965 and slowly erodes at abortion and shows how cases since Roe v. Wade and Griswold versus Connecticut have chipped away at the foundation of a case and makes that parallel from what the majority decision argues in that case to other cases that he morally feels should be overturned. It's an incredible dissent. So,
There's another one. In 2005 is the New England case. The Supreme Court said it's the community where the houses were blighted. The Supreme Court said those blighted
Eminent
houses,
domain?
yes, eminent domain, Fifth Amendment. Supreme Court said the developer can tear down these houses. Usually, you tear down the houses for public good. But what they're doing right now is to take your house and give it to another private person, developer. And they
Yes.
will use your land to build a shopping mall like Sam's Club or condominium. Is this public good? But Supreme Court said that developers can use your land, they can seize your land.
that was
and
a
give it to
huge
developers.
case.
So that's the urine of
That's a big
this
case.
Yes, this is Kilo versus New London, Connecticut is the name of the case, and it's if you look at for the law of the eminent domain, it is based on the mentioning of ability of the government to take away your private property for public good. It's at the end of the Fifth Amendment.
Fifth
If you read
Amendment.
the,
It's called
if
the
you read
just compensation
That's right.
clause.
So in order for the government to be able to take away your private property, it has to compensate you justly, right? What does that mean? Well, that's also a matter of interpretation, and it has to be for the public use. But in this particular case, it was about the city government approaching Mr. Kilo, who lived in a particular neighborhood. They wanted to build a mixed residential commercial development, and this development hasn't been built yet. So this particular part of the city from which Mr. Kilo went away, right, is run down and basically untouched. So it's worse than it was in 2005 when the case was tried. And then Lawrence versus Texas is about sodomy. The question before the Supreme Court, what Professor Forrest was saying, the question before the Supreme Court was whether the law that forbids sodomy in Texas was constitutional or not, right? Mr. Lawrence was caught having sex with another man by the sheriff. And why did sheriff appear in Mr. Lawrence's apartment? Well, he appeared there because another tenant in the same building called the police saying, I'm hearing strange sounds from the apartment of
Called in
Mr.
a
Lawrence.
weapons
And
disturbance.
the sheriff entered the premises and saw Mr. Lawrence having sex with another man. And then the Supreme Court basically decided that these laws that forbid sodomy in Texas were unconstitutional because they undermine the right to privacy. But in the future, you will see the right to privacy mentioned in the gay marriage cases,
Yes.
right? The gay marriage is now is going through the system. I believe it's before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco. Regardless of who wins in this particular gay marriage case, is going to go to the Supreme Court. You probably know that until 2008, the state of California had legal gay marriage. In 2008 elections, there was so-called Proposal 8 on the ballot during the same elections when Obama won California, right, which basically asked the people of California whether they want to forbid gay marriage or not. The majority of the people said, yes, we want to forbid gay marriage in California, but the group of lawyers, Ted Olson, a conservative lawyer, by the way, right, who was the Solicitor General during Bush administration.
Paul Clement.
I'm sorry?
Paul Clement.
And his
Yes,
wife was
he
killed,
basically is leading the charge to re-legalize gay marriage in the state of California. They won on the federal court. Now they are in the Court of Appeals because the other side appealed, of course, the judgment of the judgment of the federal court, and probably maybe in this term even the case will end up before the Supreme Court, because usually Supreme Court is really eager to give its judgments on really strong civil rights cases, and gay marriage is a civil
The
rights
reason
case.
why Gordon, Professor Vurusic, is saying that the gay marriage is going to be applied in Lawrence v. Texas, or that right to privacy will be extended, is because the law in Texas, there were two laws. It made it illegal for homosexuals to engage in sodomy, but they didn't have a law prohibiting heterosexuals from engaging in the same activity. And so Lawrence sued, saying it's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, which is in the 14th Amendment, Section 1. And it says that people should be treated equally before the law. And so here Lawrence is taking his case and saying, look, you are treating, and people can be discriminated against or treated differently so long as they're not in a similar situation. So similarly situated individuals need to be treated equally, okay? That's what the foundation of discrimination is about. So here Lawrence is arguing is fundamentally the only difference between myself and a heterosexual couple is the choice of partner. And so it's really not that much of a difference. And by treating us differently, you are violating the Equal Protection Clause. But the majority opinion written by Sandra Day O'Connor actually said, well, we don't want to go toward an equal protection issue. We're going to overturn this case and say the right to be the right to do what you want in a home is a right as a free person. It's not somewhere that the government should go. And so they wouldn't actually touch treating homosexuals and heterosexuals equal. So they didn't overturn that case on the Equal Protection Clause because it would have opened the door for same-sex marriage, which is what Gordon said it will be. But in 2003, they saw the writing on the wall, and if you have to treat them equally before the law, then you would open the door for same-sex marriage, and that's not where they wanted to go.
We have, I think, time for one more question.
There is a huge difference on this case, Lawrence versus Texas. Now, the Supreme Court did not go that far to approve what the homosexuals can do in privacy. The Supreme Court only recognized who they are, not what they do. There's a difference.
Okay, one more question.
Earlier in the discussion, you likened European countries to a mother, or European governments to a mother.
I said that Sweden, Swedish
Sweden.
people call their government mother. Yes,
Or
yes.
The Chinese government's like a father, and America's commonly referred to as Big Brother. I was wondering if you had a different familial analogy for America, or if you think it's appropriate.
Wow.
Is it appropriate? Is the analogy that the U.S. government is our brother?
I don't,
Is that an appropriate
I don't know.
term?
I can only improvise on this question, but it's a very good question. Big brother. What is? I mean, and probably some of you have brothers, right? The big brothers, and they're trying to. Yeah.
But it conveys this understanding that all they want to do is protect you. They're not trying to harm you. They want
Anybody who is
to protect you, right?
My sisters would disagree with that.
Well, yeah, with you as a brother.
Well, all right. Well, very good. I certainly appreciate our panel. I think the audience shares that appreciation. So thank you all for participating in this, and thank you for coming. That concludes our panel for today. I'm sure our panelists will answer any individual questions that you might have if you are willing to linger. So again, thank you for coming.